Well, hi everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Speed Tips by Bob and Chad. Welcome everybody. Man, I tell you what, I don't know what the weather's been around where you guys are at, but it's pretty exciting. We had upper 40s, low 50s all weekend, and today I think it ended up being like 55 degrees down here. We barely have any snow left, so at least the weather's like it's time to go racing, man.
Yeah, it's starting to feels like spring.
Yes, it does. We're supposed to get some rain tomorrow, so that'll be cool. Wash everything up a little bit. And we had that first snow that was so dirty and dusty and filthy that everything's just kind of had that dirt film all over it all winter. And oh well. So what's new and exciting with you, Chad?
Oh, we're plugging away another exciting build season Monday today. A lot of orders, a lot of phone calls, and finally got the catalog mailed, so things are taking shape for the new year.
Yeah, it's always nice when that phone rings. There's times where I get to the point where I'm sitting in my office trying to get something done, and the phone keeps ringing, and I'm like, and you're thinking to yourself, no, 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 this is a good thing. 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 This is good. I'll get my other stuff done when I get time. And this phone needs to keep ringing, so it's pretty good. We've been super busy again. I mean, we had. The shop's been full. We've got they're doing Brandon was doing a body and interior on a used car today, a customer's car, and then he's going to start on a new customer with a new car tomorrow. Troy got the front end and stuff put on it, and Brandon will start. We're waiting on the rear end. This particular customer wanted a 486 rear end, and we've got two 412s, but we don't have a 486, so we're waiting on that. And but so that's been going good.
Cool. 2 schools down, 1 to go, huh?
2 schools down and 1 to go. So a week from this Friday, we'll start our last final school, stock car school. It's sold out. Now, of course, keep in mind, people, it is available online, so we can still get people to online. And the thing that's nice about the online, like I said before, the advantage to the online deal is you can watch it forever. I mean, as many times as you want to watch it, you can go back on everything. You can do anything you want to do with it. It's pretty cool. And Amy said that as long as the people that still might want to register for the online stock car school, as long as you're registered by a week from Monday, the 20th, that we'll still have time to get you the actual books and your t-shirts out, so you have the actual book and stuff in time for the class on Friday. So that's pretty cool. Josh says thanks for doing this. It's very helpful. Well, we enjoy it. We have a good time with it. It's something I look forward to it. Sometimes I wish there was more of an agenda, but I don't. Sometimes it's hard to really get an agenda because we don't get the chance to stay on it very long the way it is. So we just kind of go with the flow and hope everybody's got questions and whatever. Aaron wants to know about solid pull bar versus a rubber biscuit. Well, in my opinion, with the right biscuit, I think there's something to say about a biscuit in there. I think anything that has a little bit of give. I wouldn't want anything very soft. I wouldn't want to get a lot of movement. And the downside to the fact that when you put a biscuit in there, it's something that can wear out. And so we don't know for sure when that biscuit might fail, because it's not if it's going to fail, it's going to be when it's going to fail, because it's a consumable part that's going to wear out. Um, I'm losing my place already. Okay. Um, Corey wants to know, hey guys, what's the advantage of running a solid heavy left rear wheel other than more weight at the wheel? Well, I mean, the big thing is the actual. I don't know, man. I'm really on the fence on running that solid wheel thing. I mean, anything that rotates, it's going to rotate slower. It's going to stop slower. Um, I would rather see static weight, but that heavy wheel is going to give you traction as long as it doesn't break loose. You get on a racetrack that's a little rough, or one of those racetracks that sheep's footed a lot. It's going to have trouble staying. The tire's going to have trouble staying in contact with the racetrack, just because it's going to go up, and it's going to try to go up further, and then it's going to come down slower, and so you're just going to have trouble to contact patch. What's your opinion, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, we played with, we got to the point where we were making a solid brake rotor and heavy wheel spacers, and anytime you add rotating weight, it delays your horsepower. So it had kind of a dual effect. It gave you traction because it was heavy, and kind of almost acted like a restrictor plate because it took longer to get it up to speed. The downfall, just like you said, is it's like carrying you into the corner farther because it's harder on brakes. It's harder to slow it down then because it's spinning. It's heavier and it's spinning the same speed, so it takes more brakes to slow it down. So that trend kind of fizzled out. I don't even know if we're still selling them heavy wheel spacers. I think we got a few on the shelf, but it kind of faded. And like you say, most dirt tracks these days are not exactly like racing on pavement. So any kind of rough or chop, it's not good. You might as well put it in the box and drink beer. So got to be careful with the weight. That's why we like the weight clamp where we all started. Being able to put it on the axle tube when it's really dry, slick, and then if it is rough and chop, you take it off. Some of them other things you're married to, like the suspension cage and the brake rotors and that kind of thing. But it's definitely there's some advantages and disadvantages of it.
Larry said racing this weekend in Texas. I heard about that there was some racing going on down there. I haven't heard about how everything worked out, but I heard that they were supposed to run down there.
Must mean the ice all melted.
Evidently, it must have. I don't know. Yeah, because they had quite a bit of ice there for a while. Josh, I might have missed it, but if it would be possible to have Bobby on there to go over some of the shock basics. Um, well, I'll have to see. His schedule's relatively busy from about 5 o'clock till about 7:30 when he finally gets the two in bed. So he's he's fairly busy. Um, his his little ones keep him relatively busy, which all little ones keep parents relatively busy. Um, is 1.5 degree of caster gain too much on the right front of an IMCA Sport Mod? And what's the best right rear drop spring cup to order? Well, Frank, on a Sport Mod, 1.5 isn't bad. I mean, I'd rather see it be like at 1, but 1.5 isn't super bad. The advantage, of course, with the Sport Mod is, the caster gain kind of, we don't have quite the dynamic traction on a Sport Mod that we have like on a 4-link. So we sometimes have to use the front end with the counter steer and everything and the caster gain to load that left rear a little bit. Where with the 4-link, we've got so much load in the left rear, we don't need it to help it because then they get that jacking effect going on. And the Sport Mod can a little bit, but not near as much. Drop cup, Chad?
Yeah, I would probably on the right rear run of our new OD Grab 404 TC tall cup. Make sure that you're not coming loose, and make sure you have a chain on there to keep tension on that spring as you're climbing down the straightaway. We're working on some new spring cups too for the future in the rear, playing with more of the spring table, some more fine tuning there. So we're gonna have some new cups that I just approved the designs on that'll be coming down the pipeline here in probably the next couple weeks.
Yeah, the IMCH changed that rule to limit it so that you can only run 13-inch springs in the back. So that 12-inch spring that IBOC has is not legal. So what you're working on would be optimum.
Yeah, 10-4. I'll slide her to the top of the list.
Yeah, no, it would definitely be optimum. Okay. Aaron is running a 16-inch left rear. I hear you guys talk about spring table. Is there a need to run an 11-inch to help with it or stay with 13? What's the benefits of running the right rear chain limiter UMP modified? Well, definitely I wouldn't run the 11-inch with a 16-inch. I would stay with the 13 for sure. The 3-inch drop is plenty. I mean, you go further than that, the 11-inch spring is going to cause that thing to lay over in the right rear and not want to do nothing. It's just going to be.
But if it's a modified, he said modified, so he's probably
so it wouldn't really matter then.
Yeah, it don't matter then. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what rate or what length spring you put in there. That's right.
Yeah.
Yep, UMP modified, right. And the benefits of running a chain limiter is, like Chad just said from the previous call or the previous guy, that we want to keep so that the spring doesn't get any free play when the car goes down the straightaway. So we want to keep it so that it has a tad bit of load. We don't want to load it a lot, but a little bit of load.
Just keep my spring table drawings right here for us. But there's the spring table drawing. So on a mod, the spring table is determined by the location of the coilover on the frame to the ground, and you want the right side to be lower than the left side.
Yeah, and optimally, 1 to 2 inches is fine. And with that being said, since you're on a pair of coilovers, it wouldn't matter if you had a 13-inch spring or if you had 11-inch spring. The car's not going to know the difference other than the fact that the 11-inch spring is not going to have as much travel. But spring rate's going to be the same if you have the same spring rate in an 11 that you would have in a 13. I still would probably stay with the 13-inch spring. Wheel spacer on the right front and left rear. What do they do to the car? Well, the wheel spacer on the right front gets that right front so that, now all of a sudden our actual wheel rate is a little bit less, gets that right front leading outside there, makes the car a little bit more stable. The left rear, what that does is it changes how the left rear aligns with the left front so that it's technically outside the left front or it's moved out further so that when the car goes to traction up, it's going to want to pull the car straighter and actually try to turn the car in a sense. I need to have my wheel offset chart here, but I don't have those charts. I should do that too. I should bring my whole book here from the school, and pull those pages out. But with having the left rear out, it's going to traction the car up better up off the corner. Okay. Chad, how much is too much left side weight? In my opinion, for a modified, over 55% is too much left side weight. Those cars are fairly narrow, and we've got a narrow tire, so we need to get weight transfer to those tires. And if we get too heavy on the left side, we don't get enough weight transfer to the tires, and it doesn't work out as well. Jerry and Steve's watching. Well, I appreciate you watching, and that's something I wanted to talk about. We're actually, since this is actually on YouTube and Facebook, we need your help. We need you to go ahead and like the pages, watch our old videos that are on YouTube so that you can go through and watch them. And once again, share them and like them. And that's kind of how we're going to support a little more support for the channel and get this channel a little bigger. Makes it a cool deal. I watched some fishing videos over the weekend, and my PR or my he's my video guy, told me about this, getting these likes and all this stuff, and that's supposed to grow the channel. So what the hell? We might as well big time and try to grow the channel. Let's see here. Jason, how important is it to have the idler arm and the pitman arm parallel to each other? Very important. You want them to run in a straight line because you want to make sure that center link doesn't go uphill or downhill. It just goes straight across, back and forth. And if it does go uphill, it goes uphill equally, because, I mean, it will go uphill slightly just because of the arc of the angles that the pitman arm and the idler arm are on. When you swing them, they're going to change directions a little bit, but you'd want them to change directions together. That could create a lot of bump steer issues if one is higher than the other, or they don't go in line. Cordy, thanks for the advice. It really helps. Chad, keep making those awesome, great products, American made. We love them all. My modified and toolbox are as much Wehrs as possible. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Corey. We do appreciate it.
Any tips on putting a Burt transmission clutch pack back in the case? Mark, I wouldn't have a clue. You're asking the wrong guy for that one, because chassis stuff I can give you some pretty good ideas on, but that mechanical stuff that's just supposed to make the chassis look really good, I wouldn't have a clue.
I think fast shafts works on trannies, don't they?
They might, yeah. They very possible. I know they do Burt. I know they do a lot of stuff down there, but I wouldn't have a clue what they do. Justin, where would you recommend running the Torrington bearing on an IMCA stock car?
Well, again, you're going to want to make sure that you stay in tension. So the left front, right front for sure, and you have to have OD grab cups to keep that bearing aligned and keep the bearing shielded from all the dirt. But the left front, if you're not chaining the left front and the spring comes loose from the spring cup, any corner that you're coming off the spring cup, you can't run the Torrington bearing. When it slams back together, generally then you snap them washers in there and it becomes a real mess. So as long as you're in tension and you have OD grab cups, I would run Torrington bearings on all them springs that are in tension, just because, as a spring travels, it twists and winds. So anytime you can relieve that stress in that wind, it's going to make that spring act truer through its travel as far as its rate, and it's going to last longer because you're not stressing the wire out so much. So big advantage to Torrington bearings. Definitely a little bit more maintenance and something you got to babysit and keep track of, but definitely worth the investment and the time.
Um, yeah, definitely, especially the right sides, because the right sides stay loaded all the time, and that right rear with the even with the steer, we made the new simulator for the stock car class, the rear simulator, and I was amazed at how much that rear end moves back and forth back there with the OEM four link. Yeah, it opened my eyes on what goes on with those stock cars, no doubt. On a GM metric stock car, are rear bearing spacers just as important as the front? Well, I truly believe they are, because once again, we're taking two bearings and making them load as they were one with the bearing spacer. You can tighten your hub up tighter, because you don't have to worry about the hubs coming loose. Um, and it helps, like I said, it helps keep the load in those bearings so that the one's not being overloaded, especially the right rear. The right rear of all these cars gets so abused, and so I definitely would recommend it. If it was my car, I would put them in it. Let's put it that way. Stephen, what's your opinion on about total right front camber at dynamic state? IMCA Sport Mod, getting about 9 degrees. Is that too much or too little? No, I don't. I don't. I think that's probably not too bad. We've got. Just trying to think in the back of my mind what the angle looked like. We've got Jake McBurney's four-link car in there, and Bobby had it all strapped down in dynamic mode today, doing some testing on it. And I noticed the right front had quite a bit of angle on it, so I don't think 9 degrees would be out of the question. Definitely, you don't get the sport mod doesn't get quite the roll that a modified gets, but it's still very well. Chad, got your new catalog today. Thank you. Bob, on a two-link car, what's the best bar angle to run, and how much is too much angle? Well, my opinion, and how we set ours, is our left rear. I set it so that it's about 28 degrees in dynamic, in 28 degrees in static. So in dynamic, it's about 45 degrees. I kind of want to make sure that they never go over 45 degrees. The left rear never goes over 45 degrees, because then all of a sudden it starts pushing up and you kind of get into a little bit of a bar lock situation, and then starts hopping the tire. And so 45 degrees, in my opinion, is kind of the magic number on that. Right rear, I'd still run 5 to 7 degrees. As long as I can get that thing to come up off the corner like I want it to, I'd rather have a little bit of angle in that right rear so that the car steers better through the middle of the corner. It'll roll a little better through the middle with a little bit more angle on it. But once it gets super slick, sometimes we have to go down to that 4-5 degree range in there somewhere. But keep in mind, when the car's all loaded in dynamic mode, that right rear is actually down. And so if we started with it being kind of level, it would end up being 5 degrees downhill, and that steer would make that car just too tight in the middle of the corner. Bryce, I know we have covered bar toe on a four-link a bunch. How about the brake floater? Don't remember anything on that. I usually try to run the brake floater rod in the same plane that the upper four-link rod is, unless I'm adjusting it to not have as much load on the right front. But I haven't played with a brake floater rod probably in 3 years. I mean, I would bolt it in there and go with it. No, wait a minute. We did actually. We did take some brake floater rod out of Jake McBurney's car one time last year when the car was getting on the right front real hard. But I think through some of the tests that Bobby was doing on that car today, I think we found some things that might have been causing that car to get over in the right front harder than it needs to. What's your opinion, Chad?
The biggest thing with that, same as any other, same as your 4-link rods, any rod for that matter, the more angle you get on it in dynamic, when you apply the force, it's going to be, it's going to hurt your components. So the brake floater rod, when you get it too towed or too misaligned and your heims are bound up, then the brake force is going too much at an angle on your plates, and that's usually when we see issues with the plates bending under load. So you're definitely going to want to have that thing outside of your standard 4-link rod, trying to run that thing straight as you can in line, just like Bob said, with your 4-link rods kind of running parallel. So definitely need to watch that dynamically. We see a few issues there where people have that rod inside their 4-link rod, right under their 4-link rod or above their 4-link rod, and it gets so much dynamic angle in it that it really is puts a lot of stress on the components.
Mitch from Makokata is watching. Stock car driver. Well, thanks, Mitch. We appreciate you. We appreciate all you guys watching this thing. I know a lot of the guys at the class the one we had 2 weeks ago, a lot of those guys talked about that they watch that every week. And during the tooling school, I had one guy kind of scold me for my computer problems that I had that one night. Said he said, I was trying to watch the show and you kept having computer problems. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I was trying. I was trying to do the show and still kept having computer problems. And I'm like, I don't get it. But hopefully I've done the same thing twice in a row. So I think I might have that figured out. But once again, you never know. Sean, is 16 degrees too much angle on a Panhard bar? IMCA Sport Mod. In my opinion, you're pushing it. That's quite a bit of angle. I know a lot of guys that run around 15, 14, 15 in that neighborhood. But I think the car would be better off if you could tighten it up elsewhere and not use quite so much angle on the Panhard bar. The big thing too is you have to also remember when we get rear end wrap, which we're going to get, even though we have a solid upper link, we're still getting quite a bit of rear end wrap due to the roll steer that goes into that factor. Well, when the Panhard bar on the back of the car the car raises up, now all of a sudden you gain a lot of angle because the pinion comes up, so then the back pull bar goes down, but the frame goes up, so then the frame side goes up. So now all of a sudden in dynamic, you might have 22, 25 degrees of actual angle. So I still believe that a guy needs to start a lot less than that, in that 10-degree range, so that, and you just have to factor that up. That's another one of those things where, like we talked about numerous times, if you want to learn your race car, take the right front spring out of it, jack up underneath the seat till it hits the chain and see where everything moves to. And then imagine whatever angles you have now, there's going to be more angle because we can't simulate all the forces in the car without actually having a pull down rig to do that. But not everybody has access to a pull down rig or could afford to have access to a pull down rig. Had a guy from Bemidji, Minnesota call me last week, and he bought a portable pull down rig, and I didn't really completely understand everything that he was talking about, but wanted to come down and stay for a couple of days and do a few cars or whatever. So we might actually look into that deal. I think that might be something that we might be interested in doing. Taylor, is there an advantage to a solid center shaft on the A-frame on an A-mod versus a double Heim? Well, you can probably answer that, Chad, as well as I can. Having the solid shaft versus Heim joints.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the car builder. The solid shaft one, as long as you have a solid shaft one where you're doing the caster with a slug and you're not doing washers, if you put four washers in the back and one in the front, you're going to misalign that and try and bend that cross shaft, and that's going to be a bind. Some of the control arms that are built now that are have really good com bearings in them are way better than they used to be. If you have an old school steel on steel, or I mean, them things were fairly bad, but the uppers have come a long way. So I mean, I think it's chassis builder preference myself, but as long as you don't do that, where you have an A arm that's a solid shaft and you're doing caster with washers, that becomes an issue for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Are there any companies that build half-inch shock extensions or consider building them? Not being able to run chains in a sport mod, the running a short shaft left front would be nice to change a half-inch instead of a full inch. I agree with you. I don't know of anybody that's actually building one. I know we had looked into having some built at one time. In fact, I'll make a note of that.
Well, our slider ones are a half inch, but they're longer than that. They're 1 inch and a 2 inch, half inch fine, but we didn't really make any fine tuning stuff there.
Yeah, no, I've actually thought about that numerous times there, Doug, because it would be nice to be able to do that. I don't know whether there's a deal where there's just not enough thread. Couldn't really tell you. Okay, got another shipment of awesome Wehrs. Thanks, Chad. What are your thoughts on a bump stop on Wasota AMOD open to 2.5 this year?
Well, thanks, Jim. Appreciate the order. The bump stops are definitely something that can be an advantage, but also can be a huge disadvantage. Obviously we're running dirt cars and you're in the rough and can get into some situations where a bump stop is going to be too coil bound or too violent, and that's when you start breaking things. So definitely going to take some tuning. We talked about it quite a bit at the class a couple weeks ago or last week or whatever, and if you get 2.5 inches now, which is really good because a half-inch one really was doing nothing. So when you have a half-inch a bump stop, you don't have enough room to control the motion. 2.5 inches, you have plenty of room to control the motion. I would start with some foams and get like a Christmas trees, or like we use a foam bump in our limiters, and then you can stack them up with like a Belleville separator washer. And you're gonna want to have your load stick and get your final number, whatever your down number is, and then tune accordingly. So it's definitely something that is going to take a lot of time and effort and money to get it right. But when it's right and the track is smooth, there's no doubt that bump stops are an advantage, because you can run a softer initial spring to get the motion onto the right front, and then use that bump stop to get your final number as you're getting to your max compression. So you're basically, whatever that car is going into the corner at, let's just say your down number is 1,200 pounds of force. You're going to need the same down number, but you're going to add bump stops. You're going to have to change your initial rate and rely on bump stop rate, which is very difficult to do in a modified. What I suggested to a few people, and there's a couple guys out there that are already doing it, that you have your spring in the car and then you have your bump stops on the shock, and if there's a possible way next door to put additional mount on the chassis for the load stick to hook up, then you can pull motion and have your bump stops and your spring on the car. You'll build a better overall number instead of having the shock and the bump stop off. on the load stick where the shock is. So you're going to spend hours and hours tuning that thing. But, if you're on a speedway that, is real smooth all the time and doesn't develop, bumps and get real rough, you're definitely going to be at an advantage with that softer initial spring with the bump stop rate. I would probably stay away from the neoprene stuff. It tends to get too, it ramps too quick on dirt car stuff. If it ramps real quick and you get into a hole, that's when you're going to bend your lowers and brake parts, and then you're going to be mad that you're bump stopping. But I like the foam. I like the tallness. That really changed the game, and it's going to make it a lot easier for, not wrecking parts, having more approach to the final number. So, but definitely something that takes a lot of work.
Dan says he has a tool to let us know the center link is parallel. Travis, when going from heavier driver to a lighter driver, where should the extra weight be added? Say 100 pounds. Well, you're going to want to put some right in front of the left rear tire. Basically kind of in the center of his back, behind, of course, not in the cockpit, but behind the chassis. That's going to be some of it. And the rest of it, you're going to want to put in the polar moment. So somewhere above the drive shaft in that neighborhood there, so that it balances the car out, and, you might. Usually, the heavier driver has a tendency to have too much left side weight, and so then you have to put a bunch of weight towards the right side, and so you're going to want to rebalance it all and basically just get it balanced so you should have, like 54% left side weight with the driver in the car, and then just make sure everything is actually a balanced setup all the way around the car. What are the advantages to a monotube shock with a base valve running minimal gas pressure required versus a twin tube, assuming both are valved and built properly? Well, Brandon, the biggest thing is the twin tube, the disadvantage to a twin tube is the size of the piston. Where with the monotube, we can have that bigger piston, which I don't know what the size of it is, but it's 1 3/4 or whatever the case is, somewhere in there, 1 7/8. That's a lot bigger piston, so we can do a lot more control of the piston and tuning of the piston to get it right. The twin tube has that small piston. It's only like a 1-inch type piston. So what happens is it ends up being, you can valve it correctly, but the thing that you're going to notice when we have that bigger piston, the gas pressure in a chamber rather than a gas bag that's wrapped around the piston, is the heat range. They're going to be able to run a lot cooler with that monotube shock. So I don't see the monotube having the fade issues that sometimes the twin tube can have. Okay. Stephen, thanks for the answer. This show has helped me get my car more drivable. Now get the driver as fast as the car. Well, we're going to leave that all up to you, Stephen. I'm quite sure that can be done. Sometimes, that old seat time thing, I know we'd like to go from 0 to 100 as fast as we can, but sometimes it takes a little bit of seat time. And like I tell drivers, if there's a practice day somewhere, I don't really care where it's at. If you can go to some practice and run laps and just log laps and make changes to the car and then go out and run some more laps so that you can feel the changes. A lot of times when you're in competition and you make changes to the car, there's so much stuff going on that you don't necessarily, when you're kind of a rookie or whatever, you don't necessarily know what change really did what, so you don't know what to expect. But at the beginning of the year when they have those practice days, man, I'd go to every one of them I could possibly go to. Chris, did IMCA just change that rule about the rear springs and the sport mod having a 13-inch? Yes, that's what I was told. In fact, actually, Ben Baker was the one that actually told me that from AFCO, that they made the rule change that you got to run 13-inch springs in the back of the car on a sport mod. I have not actually seen it in written. I'm just going off of what I was told. Kyle, any personal advantage or disadvantage running axle housing seals? Well, I like the seal because anytime we can seal some of that oil from getting where it shouldn't be, I think definitely is. I think there's an advantage to running a seal. I really don't know what the disadvantage would be to not run the seal. So I would recommend running the seals myself. I know we put inner and outer axle seals like in our stock car stuff and in our sport mod stuff, the 9-inch stuff. Chris, because the rule says 11 or 13, so just curious. Well, Chris, once again, I'll make a note. I'll contact IMCA myself, but I was under the assumption, what I was told last weekend or 2 weekends ago, that they changed that rule to run 13-inch. I will find out from IMCA themselves. Torrington bearings for coilover kits on the right rear. Does Wehrs make an OD grab cup for the coilover Torrington kit? Yes, you do.
Yeah, all the coilover kits are OD grab now.
And if a person has one of the older style cups, they can purchase the new cups, and they're all interchangeable.
We have, I think there's some of the adapters, the conversions adapters left. When this kind of started there, we made that little lip basically to go over them to adapt. So, I mean, if you had an old non-OD grab, we could put one of them on there or 2 of them on there if we still had some left. I'm not 100% sure if we do, but otherwise you can just buy the cups and convert your kit to it. Correct.
CST CMB recommendations for caster camber. Huh. That's a good. Well, I'm glad you're on top of it, Chad.
Abbreviations.
Recommended for stock car with 3-piece spindles. From what I understand, I know the stock cars that we did last year, we put 6 degrees of positive caster in the right front. Camber, we put as much camber as we could get in it, which I think was about 6 degrees, also 6.5. Left front, you're kind of stuck with what you have in the left front because the way their rule states where that jack bolt has to be. And the problem with that is you get all of a sudden you get a lot of bind in that. That jack bolt's just in the way to actually get what you really want. I know we ended up with like 3 degrees caster, and I'd like to see 4 degrees camber, but I think we ended up having to settle for like 2 degrees camber to get the 3 degrees caster. So we had a 3-degree split. On the short shaft left front, instead of making the traditional removable shock end, would it be easier to build into the heim on the bottom of the shock? Then we could could even do 1/4-inch adjustments. Well, I'd have to think about that one, Steve. I really don't know. I'd actually have to knock that up to see if that's something that could be done fairly easily or not. I can't answer the question without doing some research. UMP modified left rear extended load 16-inch spring, 80-pound spring with 245 pounds extended load, making less traction than a 16-inch ones or 16-inch 70-pound springs with 240 pounds. What's causing the difference? K value or stored energy in the spring? First question I would have, are they the same brand springs? Because that could very well have a lot to do with it. Just depends on how the coils are wound. Yeah, I'm not really sure.
That's
Other
going to
than
be.
that,
I'd
what'd you
say
say?
if they're the same brand, it would be the stored value or the stored energy in the softer spring rate.
Yeah, I would agree with that. David said he did find the OD Grab Cup over in the Wehrs catalog. Thanks. See, there's another guy looking at that catalog.
Before the show, Bob and I were discussing if catalogs are necessary, and we both agreed we're both old school. So I told him how painful the bill was to mail the catalogs, and then he said he likes catalogs. So I think we'll keep doing it.
Yeah, I enjoy the catalog. I looked through that new Wehrs catalog last Friday for quite a few minutes. And had to get that 82 car in that catalog one of these years. Let's see, Justin, what are the top 2 bad habits you see in first-year drivers? My wife is moving to an IMCA Sport Mod this year from running factory stocks for the last 7 years. She's a little nervous. Well, I can't really say I would actually say bad habits so much. She's going to want to run the car a little bit straighter, and the car's probably going to feel better if it's a little bit more loaded. And you're going to, with the sport mod, you're going to be able to charge the corner a little harder than you did the stock car, the factory stock. So, if she put 4 years or 7 years in a factory stock, she'll be fine. She will. I can understand the nervousness, but the sport mod cars are pretty easy to drive. Everybody that I've talked to said they're fairly easy to drive, so I think she'll find that it's going to be more responsive, because it's a lot lighter car, and she'll get used to it without any problem. Would shortening a chain limiter on the left rear help with forward drive at all, or would that make it worse? I would think that would make it worse. Anytime you're shortening that chain limiter on the left rear, you're taking dynamic angle out of it, and dynamic angle builds traction. Recommend a swivel OD cup with a Torrington bearing or an IMCA stock car on the front, or just the standard old cup? Well, Drew, we talked about that just a little bit ago, and we definitely would recommend, in my opinion, I'd run them on both right sides, because both right sides stay loaded, especially the right front. I mean, the way those springs and the amount of load that those springs get on there, we want to make sure that spring doesn't have any more bind in it than it can possibly have. And that OD cup with that Torrington bearing would definitely be a plus. Now, with that being, those are a little heavier. You're going to, like Chad said a little bit ago, the maintenance factor is going to be important. This is not something that you stick in there and take out mid-season. It's definitely something that's going to need a lot of care, but the benefits outweigh the care. Let's see. Andy, would it be possible to run Chad's shock jacking bolt and clamp on a threaded mount, then could adjust your shock without using any extensions?
What is the sport mod rule for adjustable
Can't
mount?
have anything adjustable.
I didn't think so. Yeah, that would be cool, but not legal.
Yeah, we put one on a couple of years ago. Accidentally put one on, and man, my phone was ringing off the wall after we posted that picture of that on that sport mod. I knew I should have looked at the rules first. Anyway, Jim says he loves the catalogs, but did we get 4 in one order? Apparently, everyone in the house is on the mailing list, including the dog.
Well, the mailing list is a funny story, but we import the mailing list from our system. So I mailed it to almost all of my employees because some of them have bought stuff from here. And the best one is, whether you believe in spirits or not. So a former employee, Marty, who worked for us and passed away of a heart attack years back. So he is not in the system, but he gets a catalog every year. So, yeah, it happened again, and it happened last year and the year before. And he got the catalog. His where he used to live, and his ex-girlfriend is like, "Hey, I got Marty's catalog again." And so the first thing I did this morning was check and make sure that Marty wasn't in the mailing list in the system, and there is no Marty in there. So I hope he enjoys his catalog.
Yeah, there you go. Well, at least he wants to keep up with what you're doing.
Yep.
There you go. Justin also loves the catalog. Only improvement would be if it came with a highlighter to circle all the parts we want.
Oh.
Yeah, that's for sure.
We do have Wehrs Machine Sharpies, but no highlighters.
No highlighters.
You give highlighters out in the class, though, for the books. Maybe we should just do a Wehrs Machine one.
Yeah, we need to do a Wehrs Machine highlighter. Yeah, no doubt.
You do the Race Tech Info highlighter, and I'll have
the
Machine Sharpie.
There we go. Then we get everybody fixed up.
Yeah.
Well, once again, like I said, make sure that those of you who are watching, if you can like this and share these videos with your friends, and whatever we can possibly do to support the channel would definitely be help. I don't know that much about this stuff, but I was told I was supposed to, and then there's supposed to be something about stars on Facebook. If you watch it on Facebook, you can purchase stars or whatever that support the channel, which I think it's a digital deal. It's not like you spend money. I'm not completely sure about all of it, but it all sounds pretty cool to me. At least now I understand why some of these guys promote that as much as they do. I watch a lot of fishing videos, and man, some of them guys talk about that stuff all the time. And I wondered why they always say that. So now I understand. Solid pull bar, short versus long angle, depending on track conditions, tips, or tuning. I run a 29-inch pull bar, so anywhere between 28 and 30 inches is what I think is a pretty good. Solid one, in my opinion, is more trouble-free. You just have to keep the heims lubricated, so that's not near as big a deal. Angle, I run in the neighborhood of 14 degrees, so somewhere between 12 and 15. would be a good starting point. I don't actually change. Once we bolt that thing in there, I very seldom ever play with it being solid. Um, on our modified stuff with the pull bars that we use, we played with a little bit different length and stuff to try to different things, but it doesn't seem to affect the sport mod near the same way with it being solid. So Donnie's got some advice for your wife there. Don't overdrive corners 1 and 3 would be the first thing I would say about a new driver for a sport mod. That's a good point, Donnie. I never thought about that, but that's definitely I've seen that happen before. And if I recall, a lot of times overdriving those corners tends to not make you very popular. Because I think you use that 6 to 7 to 8 tires have more side bite than 4, and that some guys just don't see the humor in that. Yeah, especially if they got a brand new body on and you rip their door off. Yeah, that's the way it goes. Do you run the same brake pads all the way around? No, actually, Dean, I don't. I recommend, and I don't know the full part numbers, but we recommend a fairly aggressive pad on the rear, a semi-aggressive pad on the left front, and a fairly neutral pad on the right front. AFCO part numbers, I can tell you the end of the part number is we run 34s on the rear, 33s on the left front, and 32s on the right front. I'm not as familiar with the Willwood part numbers, but they have the same type of compounds and the same type of a deal. I like that better because then you can build bias into the chassis itself rather than worrying so much about your brake cylinders and stuff like that. So I recommend the 3 different pads. Corey, do you think a 750 left front and a 650 right front is too heavy for the front springs for an A-mod with a crate? I have a Swartz car. Well, it depends on, first, of course, it depends on what spindles you're running. Also depends on where the roll center is. In my opinion, that's a little stiffer than what we normally run. We would be more in that 550 and 500 range. And I'm quite sure that your Schwartz cars probably got 3-piece spindles on it. They tend to like a little bit softer spring than the 1-piece spindle type spindle. So I think I'd recommend that. On a sport mod, do you add or remove rear spring load when the racetrack slicks off? I actually don't change the spring load. I make adjustments. Basically, the biggest adjustment that I do is trail or lead in the right, lengthening the left rear a couple turns to put a little bit more static lead in the car so that it takes a little bit of the dynamic steer out of it. One of the, you had asked earlier, Chad, when we were talking before the program about what some of the comments were on the at the school, and that was one of the comments was the school was what's the definition of static versus dynamic? And I never thought about explaining that static is when the car's sitting there at right heights and sitting there on the floor of your shop, and dynamic is where it's all yawed up on the left rear and down on the right front. And the dynamic is where it is on the racetrack itself. And so I never actually thought about explaining that one, but Corey said he's got 3-piece. Yeah, the 3-piece spindles, I'd run softer springs than that. I think you'll like what the car can do better with the softer spring. Mitch, what would I be run for Masters owners on my own stock car?
Piston size.
1 inch. the master cylinders, I recommend running 1 inch, but you definitely have to go with the brick compounds that we talked about so that you can build that compound into the system rather than building it with the master cylinders. We found with the 1 inch master cylinders, they push more volume, so you've got a little bit better brake. They don't have as much pressure, but they have more volume of fluid and give you a lot harder pedal. All right. Well, once again, we've come to 8 o'clock, and boy, there's been a lot of great questions again tonight. We appreciate you guys, man. Thanks a bunch for watching the show, and once again, we sure appreciate the comments and everything that you do. And like I said, do what you can to support the channel. And of course, Chad and I both, we definitely appreciate your business, and we've had a good night, and so we're going to let you go, and we will see you 13th. We will see you on the 27th.
Awesome. Have a good night.
Yep, you too.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.